The Brewhouse was created to capture and share with you the long history of the Genesee Brewery. But the brewery itself isn't half as interesting as the beer and the people who make it. Visit GeneseeBrewhouse.com. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Happy to have Nate Rowan back on the panel.
Thanks for having me.
And Mike.
Yes, Catalana.
Yes.
Yes. Good to be back. I've been, traveling around, seeing the world, and now I'm back.
Covering the draft.
Covering the draft.
Did the world send you back?
Yeah. I'm here, aren't I?
Pat Duffy, what do you got on? I kind of like that.
It's my Rochester Royals Tariq Evans Sacramento Kings throwback jersey. I love this thing. They have the new Rochester one from a couple years ago that I have yet to get. But
very good. Hey, let's talk some baseball. How the Major League Baseball working out for the IL this year?
There's a lot more runs. I think that that's the evidence of the 20-18 game at Frontier Field a couple weeks ago. There was a game like last week that was 17 runs by Pawtucket. We hadn't had a game with more than 13 runs by a single team in the last 4 years since I've been here. So the ball is causing the home runs to go up, but pitchers are having a harder time with it because the seams are not as raised. So their breaking pitches are not moving as much, which is part of the reason why all those factors together are why runs are up in the International League and in Major League Baseball.
So there's this report that comes out. It said, looking at the month of April, that attendance is down significantly, which is a relative term, and that home runs are way up. And you would have thought that those two things. Is that an indictment on the home run and what it's done to the game?
Not necessarily, but I think what comes with the home runs is pitchers are now more afraid to throw the ball over the plate. Whereas in the past, it was just let's throw it over and let's see what happens. Well, now if you make a mistake, the ball is definitely going over the fence. If you make a good pitch, because of the baseball now, players are so good now that they can still hit those good pitches out. So pitchers are more afraid to throw the ball over. Games are taking longer. One, because more runs take longer to play when they're scoring more runs. And two, there's more pitches because guys are not throwing the ball over the plate as much because they're afraid of the home run ball.
Is this a trend? Is something happening here that's going to result in more changes?
I think we got to see, in terms of the attendance, first of all, it's been lousy weather in the Northeast and the Midwest the entire month of April, which doesn't help.
They did say in that report, though, that the weather was worse last year. So that the year that they're comparing it with, it said that they're factoring that out.
Well, you've only had a couple of weeks of extra home runs, too. How many people that are casual baseball fans are aware that all of these home runs are happening?
Yeah, I think people expect home run balls when they go to the games. I think, to Nate's point about the extension of the game, and you go and it goes and it goes and it goes and it goes, I think that impacts things too. And let's face it, the cost of games has gone up. It continues to go up at the major league level. So when you watch that Yankees game and you look on and you see empty seats all over the place, some of those tickets are sold, some of them are not sold. It's got to be a corporate thing more than it is the individuals. I think we'll see an adjustment as it does get a little bit nicer, but I don't know if the home runs have had that big of an impact.
Going back to the new ball, if I'm a guy for the last 10 years that was a fringe minor league, major league player, a guy that was putting the ball in play, I'm furious right now, right? Because I was playing with a dead ball without even really knowing that I was playing with a dead ball the majority of my career. How many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars were cost to guys that were right there the entire time? And even further, if I'm a borderline major league pitcher that was losing my job to these guys that kept getting called up over and over again, I'm upset about that too. Like, how did it go this long with the two different leagues playing with two different balls?
Right, and that didn't make a lot of sense at all, the fact that AAA was playing with a different ball than Major League Baseball. But if you look at the Red Wings, in April 2018, they hit 7 home runs. 7. As a team, they all came before April 20th. They hit 34 home runs in April.
In that game.
It's crazy. And the thing is, we've had weather where it's the elements have been conducive to home runs, and we haven't seen that many home runs. I think the ball is making it so that we're going to see more of those type of games as the weather continues to warm up.
Just a quick last thing to his point. Why did it take so long? Because something that I learned from you guys, this year is that when a major league player comes down to the Red Wings, they're bringing their baseballs. They used to bring the baseballs with them. So you had to constantly be aware of which baseball you're using with which player.
I know it's not the best answer, but it's cost. those minor league balls cost 3 or 4 times less than the major league ball. So that was how that's how the minor leagues did it, was they were spending less money on the ball, which is one of the big reasons why it took so long to happen.
They're not doing this in the New York Penn League, are they?
No.
Okay. This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. We talk the Bills draft next. The Press Box is brought to you in part by Bay & Goodman Pizza, a local Rochester favorite. Corner of North Winton and Browncroft, Bay & Goodman Pizza. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Mike, by all accounts, the draft was a success for the Buffalo Bills. They're getting great grades across the board. What stood out to you?
That they were able to stay in their spot and get the guy, at least when they looked at the draft, that I think they really wanted. We had gotten a chance to talk to him the day before, and what struck me about Ed Oliver was how positive he was about Buffalo, which we don't always hear. A lot of times guys will give you a little lip service and all. Right away he went into, loved the scheme, went to the facilities. Buffalo would be a great spot. Like, he was all in, and then the next day they sat there and waited. Because if you'd looked at the last 2 drafts, they traded back, Patrick Mahomes' pick, and then the next year, they got Trey White. So again, when you look at it on draft day, 2 years before, they won the transaction, but ended up, giving up the spot with Mahomes. The next year, they traded up twice and ended up getting their quarterback and the linebacker. In this case, stayed where they were, got a guy in the second round that most people thought could have gone in the first, that was at the draft, that was thinking he was going in the first. So from that perspective, I think they did really well. Of course, we all know the next step is, can these guys actually play? But everybody is looking at the same thing. So grades should be positive. Value-wise, they did really well.
It's funny, the grades kind of sort of line up along the way with the guys who were making the grades.
Yeah.
And you're just saying, well, they agreed with us, so they must have done well.
Yeah, so that's just it. I mean, Ed Oliver, great. He fell to you, fantastic. Can't fault you with that. Even the offensive lineman at 2, you need the offensive lineman. What I don't get is how, after what we watched last year, knowing where the holes in this team were and seeing what was free agency-wise out there for you, you didn't take a receiver?
Yeah.
You didn't take a single receiver. In fact, I thought it was mandatory that you take a receiver in the top 3 rounds. You took a running back before you took a wide receiver, and then doubled down by coming out, Brandon Beane, the general manager, we're not separating ourselves from LeSean McCoy. That's like the 7th time he said that, right? What are you going to do? Opening day. There's a kid they signed from the CFL who's a big, tall receiver. That's who. Are you that confident in him being your big body?
Yeah.
I don't get. Then the tight end, I want to say Dixon Ward. What's that kid's
Dawson
name?
Knox.
Dawson Knox. Yes.
Yeah.
I think. Did you overthink that one? Did you try and outsmart yourself? Because he had like 7.5 catches in college,
And hasn't had a touchdown since he was a junior in high school.
exactly. Like.
Right, so he's not a productive guy. To your point about the wide receivers, I would say when you look at what they are going to put out on the field, obviously they've improved from a year ago. It would be almost impossible to not improve on what they put on the field a year ago.
Well, is that neglect in the draft, or is it a vote of confidence for the free agents they signed?
I think it's a little bit of neglect in the draft. Look, I think they looked at it and said, we have a lot of needs. They went with offensive line. To your point about running back, I find that to be very interesting. And no, they keep sticking up for LeSean McCoy. But if we look at it backwards, and so at some point McCoy's not on the team, and you say, well, they brought in Gore, who's a veteran. They brought in T.J. Yeldon, who's been around in the league, and they drafted a guy in the 3rd round. How many signs did you need to say that they were going to part ways with McCoy?
Well, then why keep defending him? They treat him like he's a first-round quarterback that is a little scared that he's going to lose his gig. He's a running back. They're the most dispensable. And by the way, when it comes to being a locker room guy, from what things we hear every once in a while, not exactly the guy you want in that room for the kind of thing they're building.
Now, the other point about even wide receivers and everything, it is still, as much as it is still only May, and a lot of transactions take place. And there are still teams that have made drafts, brought in wide receivers. There's still going to be players that are available to them, whether in trade or guys that get released from other teams. But yeah, size-wise for their wide receivers, they got a small group they're putting out there.
A very handsome, smart, bearded man said on this show months ago that if Robert Foster is a key piece of your wide receiver core starting in 2019, you're going to have serious problems. And as of right now, Robert Foster is a key piece of your wide receiver core.
We are the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Like it or not, it's next. Here's the Press Box Trivia question, brought to you by Market View Liquor, where exceptional customer service meets an extensive selection. Jefferson Road at 390.
Today is all about belief. Right? It's not enough for me to believe it. It's not enough for Coach Hill or Coach Barstrom to believe it. You have to be the ones that believe that you are capable of running the way that we all know you are capable of, and that those negative thoughts that are coming into your head, you can acknowledge and push away. What's your response to them going to be? 5 more meters, 5 more meters, 5 more meters.
Here's the Press Box Trivia answer, brought to you by Market View Liquor, where exceptional customer service meets an extensive selection. Jefferson Road at 390. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Nate, Rowan, like it or not, the Minnesota Twins so far this year?
Like it. You got to like it. They're in the top 5 in terms of home runs across Major League Baseball. They've gotten production pretty much up and down their lineup, and their division is not very good. Cleveland is significantly worse than they've been in the last couple years, and the other teams in the division, the Chicago White Sox, the Detroit Tigers, and Kansas City Royals, are non-factors. So they have a pretty good chance to pile up some wins. They're beating the teams they need to beat, and they're picking some wins up against teams like Houston and the New York Yankees here early in the season.
I think we all assumed that they'd be better. I don't know that I saw this kind of a record and this kind of a start out of that team.
We talked about home runs in the first segment. You know, they're using the home run ball to win. Their team, by and large, average-wise, has been the same, but they're hitting the ball out of the ballpark. The biggest concern for them is probably their bullpen. Can it be consistent enough throughout the middle of the season to get them into the playoffs?
Their success helping Rochester at all?
Very little. I think the one factor there is that our roster remains consistent if the Twins are winning, and that's the most difficult thing in the minor leagues, is keeping a consistent roster, because the teams that keep a consistent roster are the teams that consistently win.
What do you make of the Rochester Americans' fast exit in the Calder Cups?
I mean, so when we had Rick Sealing on, you see every once in a while, first of all, I mean, goaltending was a bit of an issue there, but every once in a while, and this is going to sound really stupid, you have too much talent to make it work, and I think this might have been an example of, you have so many guys that are good at doing particular things, for them to mesh together at the final moments is very tough to do. Not to mention, Toronto got a couple of guys back right before that series started. I mean, 5-game series are complete crapshoots. Excuse me, I almost ended up getting a show canceled. But I don't know, just everything that could have went wrong for the Amherst.
What do you saw there? Amherst go out, Syracuse went out. We had Kevin here asking, but explain this. And all 4 division winners in the NHL lost in the first round.
Well, it can happen.
Crapshoot, right?
But in terms of the Amherst a year ago, Linus did not play well. They gave up a bunch of goals. They scored, and they lost in a sweep. This time, I mean, they needed to score goals. It would be easy to say, well, you want to pin it on Wedgwood. Obviously, the young kid wasn't ready to play. We found out that he's injured. Yeah, you got the name in there again.
Thank you.
Good. But it is a shame. I mean, that's 2 years in a row, 6 games, all losses, not being able to win a game, let alone to advance. It's a shame because even the Toronto coach talked afterward about how good that Amherst team was. And I think he thought, like, we've been fortunate to win. And people that, you're sitting there watching the game know that the Amherst played well enough. You got to score goals, and they couldn't score goals.
This is kind of an out-of-our-league question to be asking, but I'll ask it to you anyway because you have an opinion on everything. Yeah. Does this affect Chris Taylor's standing in the Sabres organization?
Oh, well, if you're asking, does it affect him getting the job with the Sabres head coach? Absolutely. I mean, I knew he was a dark horse anyway, but I thought maybe winning 2-3 series, bringing that Calder Cup home, that would give you the PR push enough to hire him. Now, if he's in your future plans to eventually be the head coach for the Buffalo Sabres, which he should be at some point, you have to hire a veteran coach and put him behind the bench in Buffalo for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Like or not, Daniel Jones.
It's such an interesting take. Look, again, we talk about draft, right? You take the guy. Did the Giants take him early? Well, absolutely they took him early. And their line about 2 other teams are going to take him. I've heard that line before. It was when the Bills took E.J. Manuel and when the Bills took J.P. Lossman. The idea is, we better take him here. If the guy can play and really play, nobody's going to care that you took him 6. Patrick Mahomes a couple years ago. I can't believe the Chiefs are taking him number 10. And now you look back and he should have gone number 1. So it's all going to be about whether he can play or not. But the arrogance of Gettleman on the way he made the pick, basically not seeing the guy play, going to watch him 3 series at the Senior Bowl and saying he's my guy and taking him number 6, I think you added a ton of pressure on that kid, making him the 6th pick overall.
Did you see Gettleman's comments about how he's a quarterback whisperer? He tried to take credit for Jim Kelly in Buffalo because he was a scout on that staff back in whatever it was, the mid to late 80s.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so the year they drafted him. You didn't have any say. Like, hey, this guy who's really good and was the highest paid player in the USFL, maybe he could play football a little bit. Way to go, Gettleman.
This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Unfinished Business is next. And now here's this week's MVP Experience Stat of the Week, brought to you by Sport Clips, where it's good to be a guy. No appointment ever needed.
And now to Eichel. He floated one. Score!
Baskin-Robbins ice cream flavored coffees are back at Dunkin'. Try banana split, pistachio almond fudge, or butter pecan ice cream flavors in your Dunkin' coffee today. America runs on Dunkin'.
Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Unfinished Business brought to you by Dunkin'. America runs on Dunkin'. Pat.
The NBA playoffs right now are the most entertaining sporting events that I don't care about because let's be real, man, without LeBron, it's not any fun. Now, I say that completely hating LeBron James, not as a person, he's done some great stuff off the court, but he's so fun to root against based on, perceived arrogance and the things that he does and blah, 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 blah. And the games have been unbelievably entertaining for the first couple of series, but it's really hard for me to wrap my head around the star power that's left. The Greek Freak out in Milwaukee is amazing to watch when he's on his game every other game. You got a whole bunch of drama going on in Boston, but Kyrie Irving doesn't have the same star power as the guys we've seen the last couple of years. And then Golden State seems like it's inevitable they're going to be able to pull this off. And James Harden is a lot less entertaining when he's whining, crying, and karate kicking people while trying to take shots. I'm enjoying watching it, but it just doesn't feel the same this year. I don't understand why, and I think it's because it's not. You don't have the star. He's not there. You don't have the king to be dethroned at some point during these playoffs.
You need a villain, and it transports over different sports. I don't know why it's true, but it does seem to be the case.
Yeah, that's a great point. Who's the villain right now in the NBA playoffs?
I think the difference is, well, the Warriors in a certain way are because people are somewhat tired of them winning, but they've never been more vulnerable. And if you look, you have 4 teams in the East that I think will all compete. Whichever one comes out, we'll have a chance to compete with them because even Houston, even banged up Houston, has shown the ability to push the Warriors. It's funny, the Warriors have somewhat come back to the pack just enough that they look vulnerable enough, but you're right, LeBron is that guy. He's the touchstone.
The one thing that you never want to do is motivate the opposing team with content. And that's exactly what the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs did this week against the Syracuse Mets. You remember the incident with Rhys Hoskins and Jacob Rhame with the New York Mets? Rhame threw at Hoskins, went over his head. Hoskins, next time he faced him, hit a long home run and took his time around the bases. It's one of the longest home run trots in recorded history. Rhame was in Syracuse with the Mets, the AAA team for New York. They were at Lehigh Valley this week. Monday night when Rhame came into the game, the video that they played on the video board was of Hoskins' home run trot. So what did the Syracuse Mets do the next day? They just beat the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs 18-5. The one thing you never want to do is motivate the opposing team because the players will say what they want to say, but if you're a member of the front office and you give them any sort of bulletin board material, that's a really bad look.
And the league won't let you make fun of Tim Tebow.
That's correct. We were told not to.
What could you say bad about Tebow anyhow?
He was great.
He was great,
His
right?
hair's a little goofy.
Well,
The Taco Bell K-Man that we do is one of our most popular promotions, but we're not embarrassing individual people. They were talking about, hey, when Tim Tebow gets knocked out in a college football game, let's not show that highlight. I think that's common sense.
Someone did once.
Correct. Someone did it, and that's why those rules are in place.
Got a chance to go to the NFL draft. 3rd straight year going to it, and it's nothing like I had seen before in Nashville. Nashville is the place that was created to make the NFL draft, right? Because you look at it, in Dallas it was cool because they've got the stadium. In Philly, they turned it into an event in an area that doesn't normally have that many people and built the bars and all. But Nashville is made for it. I can't believe they're not going to just have it there every year. I mean, it is 6 blocks from the river all the way down that is nothing but bars and a space for people. And people had a blast. The one thing you notice that's a little different down there, It looks great. The sound was a bit different because this wasn't Buffalo or Philly or New York in terms of a fan base. It's a transient city. You see a lot of Titans fans, but they don't have the same sort of passion. But I saw fans from everywhere, people flocking to this. It's only getting bigger and bigger. I'm hearing Las Vegas for next year. Who knows? Typical of the NFL. They create something, and it just builds on itself and builds on itself. It'll get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it will go back to Nashville.
Yeah, and if anyone's equipped to do that, it's Las Vegas.
Yeah, well, they're calling it Nash-Vegas because it sort of has a little bit of that same feel to it. And I'm sure you've performed in Nashville before.
Nashville is a dangerous town. Let me tell you something. Whew.
This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brew House. We'll talk about that next week. This portion brought to you by Dunkin' Donuts, American Runs on Dunkin'. Thank you, Nate. Good to have you. Good baseball talk as always.
Thanks for having me. Yep.
Mike,
Yep.
welcome back. Pat, thanks as always.
Bars everywhere.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week with the Rochester Press Box.